The only blue zone in the United States is surrounded by fast food chains, highways, and a food environment that, by the data, kills people faster than almost anywhere else in California. The people inside it live roughly 10 years longer than their neighbors, in the same zip codes, breathing the same air, shopping at some of the same stores. The difference is not geography, it's not genetics. It's a set of decisions made every week, and most of them are not about food. Loma Linda is a city of about 24,000 people in San Bernardino County in the Inland Empire region of Southern California. By most measures, it's a mid-sized suburb. Strip malls, chain restaurants, a university medical center, residential streets. What makes it different is a concentration of Seventh-day Adventists, a Christian denomination founded in the 19th century, who represent roughly a third of the city's population. The Adventist Health Study, which has tracked this population since the 1970s through two major phases, AHS-1 and AHS-2, represents one of the largest and longest longitudinal dietary and lifestyle studies in the United States. The findings. Adventist men in Loma Linda have a life expectancy of approximately 88.5 years. Adventist women, approximately 90.2 years. The U.S. averages for men and women at the time of the most recent published data were 75 and 80 respectively. This is not a marginal difference. It is a decade-plus gap between people living in the same American suburb. Dan Buettner, whose National Geographic work identified the 5 blue zones, has called the Loma Linda finding the most important natural experiment in American health research, because it is the one case where the blue zone population is embedded inside, not geographically protected from, the mainstream American food and lifestyle environment. The most surprising finding from the Adventist Health Study is not dietary. It's the Sabbath. Seventh-day Adventists observe the Sabbath from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. This is not a casual preference, it is a doctrinal practice. During this period, Adventists in Loma Linda typically stop working, stop consuming media, stop shopping. They rest, gather with family and community, attend church, spend time in nature. What researchers found? The weekly Sabbath practice was one of the strongest predictors of longevity in the Adventist cohort, stronger than some dietary variables. The biological mechanism involves cortisol. Chronic elevation of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, is one of the most well-documented accelerants of biological aging. It impairs immune function, disrupts sleep architecture, degrades insulin sensitivity, and promotes visceral fat accumulation. Cortisol is elevated by psychological stress, time pressure, financial anxiety, social conflict, and media exposure. The Sabbath removes all of these inputs for 24 hours, every week, without exception. It is a forced cortisol reset on a weekly schedule, more reliable and more complete than any mindfulness practice or stress management technique because it is mandatory rather than optional. No major health system has prescribed a weekly 24-hour stress reduction period. The Adventists have been running this protocol since the 19th century. The dietary finding from the Adventist Health Study that generated the most research attention is nuts. AHS-1, published in the early 1990s, found that Adventists who consumed nuts at least 5 times per week had a roughly 50% lower risk of fatal coronary heart disease compared to those who rarely ate nuts. The finding held across multiple adjustments for other variables. This was one of the first large-scale epidemiological studies to identify nuts as a significant cardiovascular protective food. It influenced subsequent dietary research substantially, the Predimed trial, the Nurses' Health Study, and helped shift nuts from a high-fat food to be avoided into a recommended food category. The mechanism. Nuts contain unsaturated fatty acids, including omega-3 ALA in walnuts, fiber, L-arginine, a precursor to nitric oxide, which relaxes blood vessels, and polyphenols including resveratrol in certain varieties. The combination appears to lower LDL cholesterol, reduce arterial inflammation, and support endothelial function. AHS2, which enrolled over 96,000 participants, including significant vegetarian and vegan subgroups, confirmed the nut finding and added that the frequency of consumption mattered more than the quantity per serving. 5 small handfuls per week outperformed 2 large portions. For anyone looking for the single most evidence-backed dietary change from the Loma Linda research, a small handful of mixed nuts, 5 or more times per week. Is it? 330 to 435. Core Block 2, the plant-based diet data. The Adventist Health Study's dietary findings are complex enough to deserve careful reading. Adventists span a wide dietary range. About 8% are vegan, roughly 28% are lacto-ovo-vegetarian, some are pesco-vegetarian, and many are non-vegetarian. This variation within a cohort with otherwise similar lifestyle factors has made it uniquely valuable for isolating dietary effects. What AHS2 found: vegan Adventists had the lowest rates of obesity, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and certain cancers of any subgroup. Vegetarians and pesco-vegetarians showed intermediate protection. Non-vegetarian Adventists, who still followed a relatively clean diet compared to the U.S. average, still outperformed the general U.S. population on nearly every mortality metric. The implication? Plant slant matters, but the rest of the Adventist lifestyle, Sabbath, community, no alcohol, no tobacco, regular exercise, creates a protective floor even for those eating meat. And the reverse. The vegan Adventists are not simply benefiting from diet. They are running the full Adventist package. Their longevity advantage cannot be attributed to diet alone without controlling for the other variables, which the study has shown are independently powerful. Adventist doctrine prohibits alcohol and tobacco. These are not personal choices that vary within the community. They are near universal adherence rates across the cohort. This creates an unusually clean natural experiment for studying what abstinence from both substances does to a population over decades. The tobacco abstinence data is unsurprising by now. Lifelong non-smokers live longer, have lower cancer rates, lower cardiovascular mortality. What the Adventist data adds is the dose-response evidence for a community with negligible smoking rates. It shows what the ceiling of tobacco-free living looks like at population scale. The alcohol data is more nuanced. Some epidemiological research has suggested that light to moderate alcohol consumption may have protective effects on cardiovascular mortality, the so-called J-curve. The Adventist cohort, because it is almost completely abstinent, cannot test the light drinking hypothesis. But it does demonstrate conclusively that abstinence is not harmful to longevity outcomes. The Adventists' cardiovascular mortality is among the lowest of any studied American population, despite drinking no alcohol whatsoever. What the alcohol finding actually shows is that the protective signal attributed to light drinking in other populations may be confounded by other lifestyle variables that correlate with moderate drinking. Adventists with all the other longevity factors but no alcohol do not show a cardiovascular disadvantage from abstinence. 540 to 645. Core Block 4, Community and Purpose. The Adventist Health Study collected data on mental health, social engagement, and what Adventists call sense of purpose, language that maps closely to the Japanese concept of ikigai examined in the Okinawa episode. Adventists consistently report high levels of life satisfaction, low rates of depression, and strong perceived social support. The community structure, congregational life, shared practice, mutual aid networks, creates a social architecture that resembles what we see in Ikaria and Sardinia, but engineered through religious institution rather than geographic circumstance. Buettner's Power 9. His framework distilling the common factors across all blue zones: lists belong as one of the 9 elements, explicitly citing the Adventist model. The finding is that regular participation in a faith community, regardless of specific belief, is associated with 4 to 14 additional years of life in some studies. The mechanisms likely include social connection, reduced social isolation, regular cortisol reset, and access to community support during illness. The Adventist community in Loma Linda also demonstrates something that the other blue zones, being geographically isolated, cannot show as cleanly: that a longevity-promoting social environment can be sustained inside a modern American city over multiple generations, even as the surrounding culture moves in the opposite direction. This is perhaps the most hopeful finding of the 5 blue zones. AHS2 published a series of papers in the 2000s and early 2020s that refined the longevity picture. Key confirmed findings: Adventists live 7 to 10 years longer than comparable non-Adventist Californians, adjusted for race and income. Vegetarian Adventists live longer than non-vegetarian Adventists. Nut consumption 5+ times per week is the single strongest dietary predictor of longevity in this cohort. Sabbath observance, measured by self-report of weekly full rest, is associated with lower cortisol markers and better sleep quality. Social engagement and congregation attendance predict lower all-cause mortality independently of diet. What AHS2 could not resolve: how much of the advantage is dietary versus behavioral versus social? The variables are too correlated. Whether a secular person could replicate the Adventist outcomes without the community infrastructure. Whether the Sabbath benefit would persist without the doctrinal commitment that makes it mandatory. To make this actionable for a secular life. The Loma Linda longevity stack. Weekly 24-hour rest period. 1 day per week. No work, no reactive tasks, no media news cycle. Spend with family, in nature, in community, or all 3. This is the most evidence-backed stress intervention in the Adventist dataset. Nuts, 5 times per week minimum. Small handful per serving, 30 grams/1 ounce. Walnuts for omega-3 ALA, almonds for vitamin E, pistachios for gut fiber. Frequency matters more than quantity per session. Plant-forward diet. Meat as condiment or occasional element, not the center of the plate. Legumes, whole grains, vegetables, fruits as the structural base. No hard requirement for full vegetarianism. Partial. Shift shows measurable benefit. No tobacco. Minimal or no alcohol. The data does not show any longevity cost to abstinence. If drinking, the Adventist data does not support the 1 glass of wine is protective claim when all other longevity factors are in place. Community structure. Regular participation in a group that shares values: religious, secular, neighborhood, professional. At minimum, 1 scheduled communal gathering per week that is not work-related. Next, the final episode of the Blue Zone series. 5 zones, 1 pattern. What do Okinawa, Sardinia, Nicoya, Ikaria, and Loma Linda all have in common that diet guides never capture? The answer is 1 sentence, and it changes how you think about everything we've covered. Before you go, 2 quick notes. First, I'm an AI wellness educator, not a real person. Dr. James Chen is a synthetic character built to make longevity science more accessible. Second, everything in this video is educational content based on published research, not medical advice. Before starting any supplement protocol or making significant changes to your health routine, please speak with your physician. Links to all studies referenced are in the description.